All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Jim K. Ford Sens Nation podcast. My name is Steve Warren. That there is Greg Kennedy. We call him the coach on account of he's been coaching since 1902.
The Dead Sea was only sick when I started.
Welcome to it, ladies and gentlemen. We've got lots to get to today, even though it is the dead of summer. We've been a week since we last were with you, and it's amazing. Never a dull moment with the Ottawa Senators. Some of the things we want to tackle today, a trade. The Sens made a trade sending Roby Jarventie away, and it's a bit curious, so I want to get into that in a second. Sogaard has signed a 2-year contract. How's the goaltending going to shake down after the coming season? They're set for this year, but how's it going to look beyond the next season? And reasons for optimism right out of the gate. Let's hit that right now.
All right.
Because I think we all, after 7 years of missing the playoffs, Sens fans, because I feel like we're a pretty objective podcast. We tell it like it is. We're not beholden to, hey, we are worried about, our broadcast rights or something like that. When it's bad, we say it's bad. And when it's good, we say it's good. But I feel like, sometimes you get a little bleaks. You're a little frustrated with things. But there are reasons for optimism. I wrote down 5. You wrote down 5.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we go back and forth? We'll go serve and volley, why we're optimistic, and then we might run out before 10. We probably will. We'll have some of the same.
I would think so.
But I'll serve to you first. Go.
Goalie. Goaltending is, I've said it before. Haven't we sat here and said the exact same thing in other seasons? Oh, the goaltending looks solid. But I think this time the goaltending really does look solid, at least as far as a starter is concerned. I'm not going to be too comfortable if there's an injury there with Linus Ullmark, but I think the goaltending situation is a solid reason for optimism.
Yeah, and I would argue, just to add on to that, and I agree with what you said, that even if Ullmark decides not to re-sign here, God forbid, but we've seen just maybe a couple of times players in the final years of their contracts end up parting company with the Ottawa Senators. So I think we can all agree it's at least a possibility. Even if it does happen, I think it's going to be huge to have Ullmark here for that 1 year, because this team gravely needs some stability. It's in terms of the growth of the young core and developing a winner's mentality. That's absolutely huge, that they erase the goaltending from the equation and get the guys having some fun, winning some games, not hating coming to the rink. And on the other side of the coin, even if he comes in, Ullmark, in his one season and isn't very good, because let's be honest, this time last year, we were all excited about Korpisalo for very much the same reasons. They finally got a goalie, he's a proven goalie, and it didn't work out. So if it doesn't work out with Ullmark, the upside, the silver lining, it's a nasty bit of business, but the silver lining in the nasty is the fact that Steve Staios will know, proof positive, 100%, that this is a problem that goes way, way beyond goaltending. Like that's the end of that.
Yeah.
And as I said at the Hockey News this week, he puts down his surgeon's scalpel and picks up the sledgehammer this time next year.
And even if it doesn't work out, not the signing aspect of it, the re-signing aspect of it, if it doesn't work out that Ullmark's not good, like if he has yet another goaltender comes in here who should be good and underperforms, well, you're not beholden to him. He doesn't have the Korpisalo contract. He doesn't have the Matt Murray contract. So if he's not good, you're not financially strapped and stuck to the guy. So you can turn the page and move on much easier.
All right. So goaltending, we got that. We got that in common. I've got that on my list as well. So I'll go number 2, and that would be no nonsense. I know we criticized a little bit in our last episode with Chychrun and Korpisalo talking about distractions. And to some degree, that is some excuse making. But when you think about all the nonsense, I'll go from distraction and describe it all as nonsense. This coming year, it is impossible to have the amount of nonsense that this club had to go through. And let's begin with, losing a draft pick. Let's begin with losing one of your top, maybe 2 centers in Shane Pinto, 41-game suspension for a gambling violation. Then you have the new ownership coming in. That took forever. The new coach, the new GM, the replacements of them, injuries. Like, the nonsense was out of control, and it is impossible I'm not even going to knock on wood. I'm going to go ahead and say it is impossible to have the amount of distractions and nonsense this team had in 2023-24.
Yeah, the only one that you listed there that may still happen is injuries, but all of that other stuff is off-ice stuff, is non-hockey stuff, well, non-playing hockey stuff. And you're right. You're not going to have another owner change. You're not going to have another new coach. You're not going to have another new GM. You're not going to screw up draft pick. All those things are out the window. Just like, and it's been a recurring theme with this organization, right? You can go back over the years of nonsense off the ice. Go back to Taxi or Ubergate, go back to, what was the baby stuff? There was some sort of baby clothing that the Senators had out that was not safe or something. It just, if anything was going to go wrong, it did go wrong with this team. And I think you're absolutely right. There shouldn't be an excuse other than possibly injuries, but I think depth has been addressed enough that maybe even that, unless it's a lot of injuries shouldn't even be an excuse or a problem this year.
All right, so better goaltending and no nonsense. Let's move on to your next one.
Well, my next one's the coach. I think it's probably on your list too. Travis Green. Speaking of no nonsense, I think Travis Green, Nolan Baumgartner, Daniel Alfredson, this staff will be no nonsense, but also the expectations placed upon the players will be quite clear. The roles will be quite detailed into who's expected to do what and what kind of performance is expected of everyone. And the big one to me is there will be consequences. I firmly believe that for the first time in a long time, there will be consequences for poor play. There will be consequences for dumb play. The players will be held accountable. There will be a certain level of accountability required of these players, and they will know what it is, and they will be held to it. I'm looking forward to that, seeing what Travis Green could do, not only from that side of it, but the other side of it is system-wise, tactic-wise. I just think this team will be so much better. New coach, fresh page, full training camp with a new coach. All that stuff makes a big difference. This coaching staff is going to make a big difference, and that's a big reason for optimism in my book.
Yep, I agree. I think that he falls nicely, Travis Green does, in between DJ Smith and Jacques Martin. It is going to be an interesting headspace for the players because this is their third head coach in 9 months. DJ Smith, we all know how boisterous and outgoing he is, and then you've got the stoic Jacques Martin after that. So that was a big transition, and I think Travis Green now falls somewhere in between the two of them. I would like to have seen his time in Vancouver reap more big seasons, a better record overall potentially. He did have that one big season and went a couple of rounds into the playoffs. So he's not without success, but I would have liked to have seen a little more success in Vancouver, especially when you have a guy like Dean Evison, who's still out there and just signed with Columbus, I believe, in the last couple of days here. So, I guess I've got cautious optimism, but I like what I've seen so far. Mm-hmm. The proof will be in the pudding. I did have coaching on my list as well. Good. And not just that, like the full staff, right? This is Matt Nichols' first summer with the guys. Like he is a very well-regarded trainer, and he set them all off on their merry way for the summer with, their nutrition and fitness plans and things like that. So be interesting to see if that makes a difference in the off season as well. The whole staff is different. Mike Yeo is one of the guys that be an associate coach. So that's another guy in the mix as well. So yeah, a full new staff, new general manager, just a lot of doing things the right way professionally. And as Michael Andlauer always says it, first in class. Mm-hmm. I'll go on to the next one.
Sure.
I've got two here that we still haven't run with. Trying to decide which one you won't go with. I'm going to go with, and I'll credit the guys on the podcast. What was it called? Empty Netters. Shane Pinto was on Empty Netters and had some things to say about some specifics about his gambling suspension. It was pretty much like everybody thought, but it was the first time he had articulated the way he did. And that was, I had buddies placing bets for me back in the States, and that's what it kind of came down to. But the guys on that podcast, and I apologize for not having their name at my fingertips, but they called it Jealous Brady. Jealous Brady in Ottawa this coming season. I don't know how much of a factor that might be, but I think it will be. I think it'll just be a little extra something, just reaching down a little deeper from where he's been. Nobody's ever going to say that Tkachuk's not out there giving it his all. Nobody's going to say he doesn't want to win maybe as badly as anybody in the league, but there's something about that sibling rivalry from the time they were kids, whether it's fighting over the bigger ice cream cone or winning at sports. Like Brady has always wanted, I'm sure, to have what his older brother has had, and I'm sure he's proud of Matthew, but I'm absolutely certain that Brady Tkachuk will come to town, to Ottawa this year with just a little more swagger, a little more seriousness, and it'll be a different Brady Tkachuk in the fall.
I like that one, Steve. That's good. Jealous Brady. I like that. I had Brady sort of in an answer, I guess, in my next one. I'm not sure that he needs to, but I had the return to form of a couple of players, specifically Timmy Stützle and Thomas Chabot. I think a return to form from those two guys is a reason for optimism, and I'm optimistic that both of them will return to form. I think Jimmy Stu had a tough year with the wrist injury, and there was something in his neck that was bugging him all year. I think he comes back healthy and produces as he did 2 years ago and even better. I think Thomas Chabot, fully healthy, new coach, new system, more details. I think Thomas Chabot is better. So I had return to form of those two and kind of threw Brady in there as well. But he didn't really slip from form last year. But just a steady increase in Brady's production is to be expected. And I really think Chabot and Stützle are going to have a lot to say too, as far as bringing this team up and being better come this season.
The last one I have, and I agree with all that, is just the general rebalancing act that they've done.
There you go.
I really feel like this is a team that, and we've talked about it to death, but the changes they made, you can look at some of the deals if you're doing a fantasy hockey trade. Chychrun for Nick Jensen, what? But they just make sense from putting together the puzzle pieces of a good team. This is a team that just had too many missing pieces. They had a lot of the same pieces, a bunch of corner pieces, but you still need all those other things, all the different ingredients that go into a Stanley Cup recipe. The Sens weren't close to it. And I feel like in a couple of cases, I go, not sure about that just for the sake of that player, but they addressed some needs, and the biggest being on the blue line with the addition of Jensen that will allow others. It's not just a matter of these guys fitting better, but it will also allow others to be better and do what they do in a better fashion. So the great rebalancing act would be my final one. Have you got any others?
Yep. No, my final one was balanced lineup / top 4D. I'm right there with you.
There you go.
I think just to piggyback your comments on Nick Jensen, if the Senators truly believe that they've drafted well or that they have prospects who can play D on this team in the future, then getting out from under Jakob Chychrun's contract, and not just what it is now, but what we would have had to pay him to extend. There's a value to that as well. And to get somebody to take that off your hands, there's a value to that as well when you make a deal. Like you've traded Jakob Chychrun, and oh yeah, by the way, you're probably going to have to pay the guy $7 or $8 million. That diminishes your return. So getting Nick Jensen older, not going to be as long, won't need a new contract next year. Well, will, but it won't be the same amount as Chychrun. There's a value in that too, folks. So you've gotten out from under an expense that you didn't really need anyway, and you got a decent defenseman who's going to solidify your top four at the same time. So there's more value in that than most people might see.
Yeah, I think people, Greg, they forget all about cap room as an asset in a trade. When you're evaluating a trade, that's often left out of the equation. Let's use Vladimir Tarasenko from last year as an example. They trade him at the deadline. This is a former first rounder who's had, a bunch of 30-goal seasons in the league. He's not old or anything, and he helped Florida win a Stanley Cup, and the Sens got 2 third-rounders. But also his third-rounder eventually when Florida won the Cup. It was a third and a fourth conditional. But what we forget is the asset of getting that cap space to be able to do other things. And that's true in any trade. You always have to consider that cap room that's been freed up as part of the evaluation of the trade. It is an asset, just like a player. So you always have to kind of keep that in the back of your mind. So there you go. Reasons for optimism for the coming year for the Ottawa Senators. Let's take a time.
No.
Let's take a time out right now.
Okay.
Because clearly I need one. Have a couple of sips of coffee, and we'll have more coming up after these words. I am so done with old school Christmas lights. The tangling, the burning out, the minus 30 degree installation dangling from a ladder. Goodbye Christmas lights. Hello Celebrate, your permanent holiday lighting solution. I've got them on my home right now. When it's daylight, they're absolutely invisible. But at nighttime, things come to life. Right now, with the beautiful weather, we're looking forward to Canada Day. And of course, the classic colors of Christmas. You can really make the lights dance, all controlled from your smartphone. And on those nights when there is no occasion or holiday, you can roll with just a beautiful, subtle white light. And the installation team from Celebrate Ottawa was fantastic. So you can keep on rolling with old school Christmas lights, or you can contact them today at celebrate.ca. Yay!
This is Ryan. Ryan would love to start his own podcast as a fun way to create content for all his platforms, to better connect with his customers and build a new audience. But Ryan isn't great with technology, and he has a lot of questions. What's the easiest way to record a high-quality podcast? Does he need to travel to a studio? What equipment will he need? How does he get his podcast online? What if he has an out-of-town guest? Capital Podcast had all of Ryan's answers. After a free consultation, we took care of everything for him. All Ryan had to worry about was jumping on the mic and starring in his own show. He's recording this week's episode right from his office. His expert guest this week is one of his customers who's in a Chicago hotel room. And Capital Podcast is online with them, making sure the final product is perfect. Easy, convenient, professional. Contact us today and star in your own show with capitalpodcast.ca.
So just when you thought the Senators had snuck off to enjoy their summer, a little golf, a little cottage country, Steve Staios comes back with a vengeance. He signs Matt Sogaard to a 2-year contract. The first year, a 2-way. The second year, a 1-way. And around the same time, he pulls off a trade with the Edmonton Oilers. And it's a bit of an odd one, I got to say. Roby Jarventie, second rounder in 2020, dealt to the Oilers for a former first rounder in Xavier Bourgault. He was a Quebec junior scoring star in the day. And Jake Chychrun. I'm going to go with Chychrun because he's a Western Canadian kid, not coming out of Quebec where it would probably be Chessel. But yeah, fourth rounder the Sens gave up in there as well. I'm kind of trying to figure that out. You know, not, in all likelihood, everybody we're talking about here, it probably isn't going to be an impact NHL player or an NHLer at all. But if you look at the statistics of the 3 active players, like Jarventie, he had almost a point a game in the American Hockey League. This Chychrun kid hasn't even got to the AHL on a full-time basis. He's an East Coast League guy and hasn't even scored there much. And Bourgault is a mediocre AHL scorer at this stage of the game. So I'm just trying to figure why Staios is giving up on a prospect for 2 prospects who are even more underwhelming than Jarventie.
And why did you have to throw in a 4th rounder?
Yeah, it's like that Zibanejad deal, or was it the Brassard deal where we're throwing in a second rounder in there somehow? Yeah, didn't make a lot of sense.
I did read the Edmonton perspective on the Athletic, and the gentleman whose name escapes me, he seemed to think that that Jarventie was the best player in the deal, and Edmonton won the deal, and this guy's got a shot at making their team. So that's interesting. I think Bourgault will bring some offense and maybe become something, but I'm with you. They all look like minor leaguers to me in a 4th round pick. So it's a strange trade. I wonder if somebody did something, or if maybe they just promised Jarventie, okay, we'll get you a change of scenery. You know, we're going to help you here. We're going to move you along and see if you can't catch on somewhere else, because it doesn't look like either side to me was, unless somebody's found a diamond in the rough and knows something that we don't know. Who knows, right? It just doesn't look like anything. It's apples for oranges, or apples for apples almost.
And maybe we need to look at it the same way we look at Jensen for Chychrun. You know, Steve Staios has his own idea of what this team needs and what it lacks. And maybe they, again, feel like they have enough of the Jarventies of the world. They need guys that can maybe chip in a little offensively, but do other things as well. Maybe with the new look Ottawa Senators. And we saw at the draft, if you ever wonder what the Senators' new policy or game plan is. Just look at that NHL draft back in late June and the number of big players that they decided to draft. This is what they like now. Now, the other two guys aren't necessarily of that ilk, but the other thing that Staios went after in this offseason was guys who know how to play two-way hockey, who play the right way. And so maybe that's where the advantage lies with these guys. Jarventie has been more impressive statistically, offensively to this stage than the other two guys, but maybe Staios had a pretty strong opinion of his two-way game.
And it's also another move here that allows us to assess, obviously not right away, but down the line, it allows us to assess the new pro scouting staff. You know, right. The Jensen trade fits into that. The off-season free agent signings fit into that. There's now more things there to look at 6 months, 12 months, 18 months from now to assess the pro scouting staff.
Yeah, Ullmark, Amadio, Perron. Yeah, it's not been a great record of late, and see what this group has. There's a lot of new bodies in that scouting staff. I was on the website the other day and I was like, wow, look at this. Check this out. Wow.
Yeah.
A lot of new faces in there for sure. So there's the Jarventie deal. Also wanted to talk about the Jenik trade in that that was for Igor Sokolov earlier in the month. And again, as with the Jarventie deal, it's probably not going to amount to a whole lot, but it does put an end to everything the Sens got in the Mark Stone trade. The trade that, again, Pierre Dorion called the proudest day of his GM life. He's got nothing left to show for it now 5 years later. So Sokolov was the second rounder the Sens ended up getting. He's gone straight up for Jenik, and Jenik is now the last little branch kind of just peeking its way out of the stump of the Mark Stone trade tree. Eric Brandstrom was the crown jewel. He didn't work out. They let him walk this summer. He's now a Colorado Avalanche. And the other guy was actually the guy nobody ever talks about, but he actually might now be the best guy in the deal other than Mark Stone, and that's Oscar Lindberg. He only came here and played 20 games. He had 9 points and then was gone as a UFA. Never thought of again. But this year, his Swedish elite team, they won it all. He was their leading scorer. Oscar Lindberg had 51 points in 50 games and was excellent in the playoffs as well. So, yeah, that's what's left of this deal. But Jan Jenik is all, nobody's left from the actual deal.
Right.
But Jenik is left over from the Sokolov perspective. So the trade tree is still technically alive. And who knows? I mean, this is if there was ever a Staios acquisition, it's this one. Because as we've talked about, he's a former Hamilton Bulldog, and he had pretty strong feelings about him back in the Ontario Hockey League when he suffered a knee injury at the World Juniors. Staios referred to him in the Hamilton Spectator as the best player in the Ontario Hockey League. So that's not that long ago. And so Staios wants to give this guy another go.
Yeah, the kid was pretty stellar as a junior. There's no doubt about that. Like, more impressive than a Sokolov. It doesn't take much, but he skates better than Sokolov. He'll bring more speed, probably a little more soft skill, a little more finesse. Sokolov is much more of a hard skill guy, a big body guy. Is part of this just the same sort of thing as I threw at you about Jarventie? Is this you've been around long enough, kid? You're not going to get anywhere here. Let's give you an opportunity to go play somewhere else. I just wonder if that's part of this as well. There were enough guys held over from the Dorion days, and we're just kind of going to clean them out here. And I think that's probably a large part of this as well. And if you can get something for it, this is a player that Staios knows well. So, hey, maybe the guy can be resurrected. Maybe his career path can get back to where it was once thought it was going to be. And the guy starts producing at a decent level, and maybe there's a spot for him somewhere on the roster.
Yeah, I think he was a guy who had more than 2 points a game when Staios made that declaration about him. So, yeah, I mean, he's like you talked about, he's a better skater. He's also a guy that can play all three forward positions. He was a center back in junior. Arthur Kaliev was his winger, and so they lit it up together. So he goes to the World Juniors, suffers a knee injury, ended his season, and that was that. And he just hasn't kind of found his way since, but much better skater, even after post knee surgery all these years later. So, yeah, I think it was probably a case of two teams just kind of giving their similar prospects, not similar as far as their styles, but, both junior scorers, both RFAs, both need a change of address after 4 years in the American Hockey League apiece. So seems like a good deal for both. And that was the end of the Mark Stone trade tree, except for Jan Jenik. Moving on now.
Yeah.
I did mention Mad Sogaard signing a 2-year contract. So what do you make of what might happen after this coming season? Sogaard has a 2-way contract this year, a 1-way, meaning it's NHL money, whether he's down in the minors or in the NHL the following year. And then you've got the Ullmark factor. We don't know what's going to happen with him. Same with Anton Forsberg. Steve Staios is going to go in the NHL this year with not one, but 2 goalies in the final years of their contract. And now you got Sogaard getting a 2-year deal here. How do you feel like it'll all play out in a couple of years?
I think Sogaard is one of the 2 goalies here in Ottawa in the second year of this deal. Whether Ullmark is still here as number 1 or they're forced to go out and make a trade again or sign a free agent goaltender to become the number 1, I think that definitely Sogaard is number 2 in 25-26 season. Forsberg, unless he has some incredible rebound and produces the way he did prior to this contract being signed, I can't see him being around here beyond this year, if he even finishes this year. At some point, maybe Sogaard comes up and Forsberg's lost on waivers when they try to send him down or something. Or traded outright. I can see Sogaard being here this year, but I could definitely see him being here next year, one way or another, either back up to Ullmark or back up to somebody else.
Am I wrong to be bleak about Ullmark? I mean, he seems like a great guy. It seems like he might be cut from a different cloth, the way he was talking about family and how it's, music to his ears that Ottawa is a great place to raise a family. And it is. I love it for that. But I look at guys like meaningful impact guys, and we've seen this long history of it from Karlsson to Stone to Duchesne to Chychrun to DeBrincat, and the list goes on. I liken it to the same reason why the Sens in their history really don't go out and get some really big-time impact UFAs, because these guys have options. And so they're entering the final year of their contract. And if they're going to sign an extension with Ottawa, man, they are foregoing a lot. And as much as, again, Ullmark seems like he might be a different kind of a cat, I've just seen it too many times with guys, impact guys in the final years of their contract where they don't stay. Where are you at in terms of your optimism about Ullmark?
Oh, I'm good. I'm optimistic about Ullmark for the reasons you stated at the beginning. The fact that he seems like a guy who is looking for the exact things that a city like Ottawa provides. The list that you gave, I think in every case, it came down to 2 things. One, the ownership, and 2, the team sucked. I think that played a huge role in Karlsson, in DeBrincat, in who else did you mention? Sorry, I'm drawing a Stone, Duchesne. Yeah. Those guys were leaving here because the team either sucked and or the owner was a clown. Like that, let's not, call a spade a spade. Those were definitely key factors in what ticked off those players and made them want to leave. But the other difference is those guys, I think age-wise and family-wise, were in a different place than Linus Ullmark. Not necessarily age-wise when you compare him to Duchesne, but I think that still he's in a different place with a wife and a young family and what he's looking for and what he needs off the ice from his home base. I think he's got a different perspective and is going to love the stuff that Ottawa has to offer. Whereas the other guys are maybe younger or were younger, earlier, different stage in their relationship or their marriage, or in the case of Stone, he wasn't even married yet. It's just, you have a different look on things. You have a different outlook on life before you're married, then after you're married, then after you have kids. At each stage there, your outlook changes and what you need around you changes. And I think Ullmark's at a much different place than those guys, and we'll see the benefits of being here in Ottawa. And I can really see him staying. I think the only thing that's going to cause him to maybe want to leave is if the team sucks. And that, I can't blame anybody for that. If the team sucks and I'm a free agent and I go anywhere I want, I'm going to go. It's just, you got to make a pretty compelling argument for me to stay, regardless of how good the community is and how good it is for my kids and how good it is for my family. I can find that in any number of other markets within the 31 that would be available to me around the NHL.
Mark the day down. You are way more optimistic than I am on one of these things. Normally it's the other way around, to be honest. But I mean, I like that. And I hope your theory is right. But when you talk about family, we just saw Tarasenko bolt out of town to be with his family. And so I guess it depends on the circumstances. The one other potential free agent for next season is Claude Giroux.
Oh.
And he was on the Coming In Hot podcast this week. Coming In Hot podcast with Brent Wallace, Jason York, and Sean Simpson. And they asked him the question, what about re-signing? What about an extension? And he actually went, it was like, is there a playbook that they go to on this stuff? He said exactly what Jakob Chychrun said when Tim Baines from Post Media at the end of the season asked the same question. What about an extension beyond this year, Jakob? Haven't thought about it. And then Giroux does the same thing. I honestly haven't thought about it. Like, what is going on? It just made me go right away. He's not leaving, is he? Is he going at the door as well? I mean, that would be a guy that you have to be optimistic about because family and hometown, like you just talked about with Ullmark, it's that multiplied by the fact that all of them are from Ottawa. So if there's ever going to be an exception to the rule, it's going to be Claude Giroux, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just, I was actually kind of ticked by that response. Here was an opportunity in a setting where he should have felt comfortable to say what he really thinks and really feels. And now I might be wrong, but I got to believe he's thought about it. I mean, this all the same reasons I just outlined talking about Linus Ullmark. You're married with children and you have a home, you've got a budget, you have expenses in your life. Like, aren't you kind of thinking about, well, gee, what kind of expenses am I going to have to spend next year? Like, aren't you thinking ahead? What's it going to cost me? Can we afford to buy a new house in a new market? Of course, they probably can, but do they want to? Do you want to uproot your kids? All those things should be factoring into it. So the fact that he can come out with a statement like, I haven't even thought about it, I find that hard to believe. And I'm a little disappointed. I really thought we might have got a good straight answer out of that question.
Yeah, hard to say. I think, there's a chance and you gave Chychrun some benefit of the doubt as well. You get that question thrown at you. It may be just another way of saying no comment.
Yeah.
Not being committal one way or the other. Because if you start saying, I want to be here at all costs, well, now you're costing yourself money in negotiations. Oh, Steve Staios says, oh, look at that. He doesn't want to go anywhere at any cost. Cha-ching. We're going to save some money with this guy. So you don't want to tip your hand in negotiations, but I don't know if you want to, go with I haven't thought about it. Honestly.
Yeah, I mean, there's other ways to answer the question other than I haven't thought about it and no comment. Like, right. Yeah, my wife and I have discussed it. It's a decision we'll have to make. Now is probably not the time, but we may lean one way or the other. But at this point in time, we don't feel like sharing that with people, or we'll make the decision when the time comes. But to say that you haven't even thought about it, like, come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know who had it right, ironically enough, was Alex DeBrincat, because when at the season ending availability 2 years ago, his body language sucked.
Yeah.
You could tell that there was something brewing there. But he, in terms of the actual words he articulated, it was pretty good. It was like, I'm open to anything.
Right.
That's all you had to say. I'm open to anything. I think that worked very nicely. Didn't close the door on anything. Again, he kind of tipped his hand by body language. But in terms of the actual words, had he sold it better, I think that would have been perfect. Right? Wouldn't you think?
I agree. Yeah. I mean, again, he could have just as easily said, and I'm open to anything may really be a lie, right? In which it probably was, but at least it was an answer other than, oh, I haven't even thought about it. Like, come on.
Yeah. All right. Let's close it out with Zach Ostapchuk.
All right.
Ostapchuk. Let's close it out by me getting the pronunciation of the kid's name right. Zach Ostapchuk. what do you think his chances are of making this team? Because I'm looking at the roster and the possibilities. I do not see anybody carved in stone on that fourth line. And I think there's two reasons why. Ostapchuk? I'll get the name right one of these days. Yeah. There's two reasons why I think he has a very good chance to make it. One is his size. He's 6'3", pushing 200 pounds, and probably going to get bigger this summer. That is exactly what this team is now looking for. Again, see the results of the 2024 Ottawa Senators NHL draft. Then the fighting void. I know that fighting is on the way out, but this team had 24 fights last year, and a lot of them, almost half of them, just went out the door. Mark Kastelik was this team's leading fighter with 7 or 8 majors. There were some others that went out the door with odd players like Kubalik and Joseph, for example. So I don't want it to all fall on Brady Tkachuk and Zach McEwen, because I don't want Tkachuk to be in the penalty box as much this year, and I don't want McEwen have to play more hockey games than he did last year. He played 30 last year, maybe 40 or 50, okay, but I don't want him to, play a full season just because you need another fighter. Ostapchuk is a guy that's been to 2 World Juniors. He's not just going to come in and be that fighter. But if you go to hockeyfights.com, make that your internet homework, ladies and gentlemen, and check out Ostapchuk's fighting resume, one of them against Michael Rempe, that guy has done very, very well. So he could serve a bunch of different roles for this team if skill-wise he's ready to be in Ottawa.
I can see him being a poor man's Brady Tkachuk. He's not going to score 40 goals. He's not going to score 75 to 80 points, but he can bring everything that Brady brings and play center, solidify a fourth line spot there. Play him with a finisher. You might get more goals out of the fourth line. Play him with some energy guys. You'll see some spunk there. And as you just alluded to, I agree with you. Somebody needs to take some of that weight off of Brady as far as being the fighter goes. And I don't have a problem with Brady with the spontaneous fights. When Brady's, in the corner mucking up with somebody and ends up fighting, it just is a spur of the moment thing. That's okay. But there are times in games, and we know this, when Brady gets into a fight just because the team needs it. And whether you agree with it or not, it's a fact of life in the National Hockey League. Teams can get fired up from that. Teams see that. There's our leader going to war, and we're fired up now. Just as a boost, as a momentum change, as a emotional lift. Well, maybe Zach Ostapchuk can do some of those fights. We don't need Brady doing those. Brady, you stick with your sort of spur of the moment, has to happen fights, and those extra fights aren't necessary, right? You got Zach Ostapchuk in the lineup now, who could take on some of those fights, and then you've still got Zach McEwen around, who's just going to have his one fight every game because, well, that's what he does. But I think that Zach Ostapchuk, you are correct, has a good opportunity to make the team just because of the way he plays the game versus some of the other guys that he's in competition with.
Yeah. And remember his first game, he was so good, they put him in the overtime where he broke up a Sidney Crosby pass and the puck ended up going the other way. He didn't get an assist on it, but the Sens would get the overtime winning goal a short time later. Very impressive in his debut. And that's the kind of guy you want, your bottom six. And with Tkachuk, I look at him, and I don't ever want him to stop being the bull in the China shop type. But I also don't want to see, when I look at the penalty minute leaders and the fight leaders in the league, I don't want to see him right there beside all the game's enforcers either. He's your captain, for goodness sake. You don't want him in the penalty box that much. With that, we shall call it a day, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for being with us today here on the Jim K. Ford Sens Nation podcast. Thank you again to Jim K. Ford for being our title sponsor. Jason and Lori and everybody at Jim K. Ford, great supporters of the program, great partners. Thanks as well to Celebrite. And thank you, Greg, for being awesome as always. Don't forget that our website is sensnationhockey.com. Please check out the hockey news on the site editor there, thn.com/Ottawa. We are pumping out Sens articles like crazy, so check that out. And until we meet again, we shall talk to you next time. Thanks, Greg.
Have a good one. Thanks, Steve.